Welcome. This is Steve Shadrack, founder of Support Raising Solutions. This podcast is part of a 15-week series launching your first 100 days after boot camp. Today's episode is hosted by our friend, Aaron Babiar.
Our guest this week is Ryan Williamson, who is with Word of Life Ministries. And Ryan is the Mission Care and Development Coordinator. He's actually been living fully funded for 21 years. It took him a couple years to get started initially because he's learning how to raise his own support. But now he helps oversee nearly 1,500 missionaries worldwide in 70 different countries. And they onboard about 100 new missionaries every year. So Ryan, we brought you in to really talk with us about just being encouraged, which is the week 4 email that got sent out after someone's either they've been through the boot camp or foundations, or maybe they've just happened upon the podcast and they decided to listen to this because they read the God Ask or whatever else. But first of all, let me just say welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Aaron.
Well, it's always fun to see you, and I know you and I have had the opportunity to facilitate a boot camp or two together, but you get to wear a pretty important hat in your organization, and really wanted you to speak to this particular topic because when you're dealing with over 1,500 different people and or families raising support, discouragement probably comes in sometime. Am I right?
Yeah, once in a while.
Once in a while. Okay. Well, as we were prepping for this, I challenge you just to kind of share some things that you've learned about people being encouraged or what to deal with discouragement, and some personal stories or maybe even some lies that people are believing that are causing discouragement. But what's kind of the first thing that has come to mind for you as we've kind of considered this topic?
Well, I think discouragement is a very common occurrence for anybody that's raising support. I think number one, it's a spiritual battle out there. And Satan certainly doesn't want our missionaries to be fully funded, fully focused on the mission that God has given them. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a critical topic that we need to address on a regular basis. And really nobody's out of the reach of that discouragement, I think.
Right. It's not because, I live in this other country, so I can't do this thing. Or I grew up in this part of the world, so this isn't possible. Anybody can have the same discouragements. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even you and I, Aaron,
Sure.
Who teach people about this and try to be the encouragers for them. A lot of times we can face those moments as well, obviously.
Absolutely. You and I had a chance to talk just a little bit before we stepped into the studio today, and we were talking about how sometimes people they'll quit. Like they'll pull up a little bit earlier. They might even start making other plans. 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, they planned to get fully funded, and now they're planning getting a job down at the bank, which would be fine if that's what they were called to do. But we don't always get the sense of what's going on, and people might just kind of pull up because they're discouraged, and it's too soon to quit. Unwrap that for me a little bit, and what's someone supposed to do? Because we might have somebody listening to this at some point. That's right where they're at right now. They're going, wow, it was easy when I was getting training, but now I have to do this. Maybe I should just pull back from this.
Yeah, and I think most of the time that's just a loss of perspective for people, because you kind of get in the heat of the battle and you face a few discouragements and things don't seem to go your way at the moment. And again, this is a battle out there for sure. And you don't talk to people. You don't talk to the right people, perhaps. Right. And maybe you hear from the wrong people. And, just recently, last month, towards the end of the year, I had a young man who has great potential for the Lord. And he called and said, this is what I'm thinking. I need to do this and I need to do that. And my family's been encouraging me to consider something else. And so we talked for a while, and he seemed to be more encouraged and really hated to leave our ministry. But the reality was he already had a job with, you guessed it, a bank.
Oh, really?
In their customer service area. And
wow.
The things were already in motion, and he didn't feel like at that point he could give it up. But it just broke my heart, because if you'd called me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe we could have talk this through. And I think, but people get maybe ashamed or embarrassed, or maybe they're fearful of our response. And so they don't want to say anything at the time. And it's like they create the safety net first.
Right.
And then they come back to us, and then they feel like they're too far down the road to turn back. And it's really sad.
Yeah. And that really starts digging into the whole transparency thing, which I know you can touch on. But years ago, I had a friend who was very much called to ministry. I'd seen him in ministry. He was fantastic. but I found that he was driving an ambulance, which, man, we need ambulance drivers. We need firemen. We need policemen. We need teachers. There are people that are in these wonderful jobs that we need to just exist as a culture, as a people. But that wasn't his calling. And so I got the feeling that he kind of struggled with some transparency when he hit some difficult times. And that was his fallback. So unwrap transparency for us a little bit and what that can look like for a support raiser.
Yeah, well, I was recently in South America and I had the opportunity to do a boot camp down there and share. And there was a lady there that'd been in the ministry for a number of years, and she'd been a salaried employee, but they're moving all their missionaries to a more mission status so that they can have a support team behind them. And as we're sharing, she just kind of broke down and said, I'm a cook. Who's going to want to support a cook? That was a discipleship center where young people come to learn about how ministry and how they can serve the Lord with their lives and those kind of things. And
so she had a vital role, and yet she was feeling like she didn't matter.
Yeah, I just cook food, she says. And so they took time and they prayed with her and they encouraged her. And during that time, encouraged her to make some phone calls to past students that she'd been involved with, actually had discipleship ministry with, beyond just cooking meals for them. And she set up a few appointments. And the very first person that took her on for support, the equivalent of $50 in the U.S., and she was, beyond the moon. She'd never been supported before. And the first person right out of the bat takes her on. And
praise the Lord.
It was just she could have quit.
Yeah.
She could have been one of those who didn't talk, didn't share, kept it to herself, was embarrassed, hid it, and could be on to other things right now. But now the Lord's continuing to use her there in that country, and it's really encouraging.
So somebody's stuck right now. They're not feeling good. They're just really questioning their call, and they know that God is faithful, but they're also like, yeah, but this is hard, so maybe I should take that as I shouldn't do it. Who do you think they should try and talk to? Because obviously, you and I would love to talk to them, but we're not giving out our phone numbers on this. But there's probably somebody in their life that has more of a window into their life and into their ministry and into their calling. So answer this two different ways, if you would. What would you do if you're that person that you're pretty new in the support raising thing and you don't necessarily have a great organization that has a trainer or a coach or someone to call? But also the flip side, for the person that's in an organization, they just feel like, well, I guess there's 1,499 other people that are able to do this, but I'm the one who can't. Maybe I should just quit. So what would you say to both of those different individuals?
Yeah, I think you want to talk to somebody who has been successful, another missionary, another team member, and you find out they've been through similar circumstances, and they can be an encouragement to you and show you how the Lord worked through that. Obviously, you need to go to the prayer and trust that the Lord will kind of bring those people into your life, hopefully. Hopefully you have an accountability partner or a coach, somebody that can be an encouragement to you, and that you're comfortable enough that you can be transparent with them and really open about what you're going through.
Yeah. There are people out there, and you know this, Ryan, but I wasn't one of these people. I don't think you were either by the sounds of it. There are those people out there that just, it's like they sneeze and they're fully funded. Like it just happens like really quickly. And so sometimes those people might not be the great person to call because it's just like God bless them in a way that they might not relate with you as well. But wouldn't you agree? Most people who have raised their support and are fully funded, they dealt with some serious discouragement at some point early on?
Oh, guaranteed. Absolutely. Everyone faces discouragement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you and I had talked a little bit earlier, and you brought up how social media can play into this whole be encouraged thing. So go ahead and unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, sometimes we get a little focused as those of us who are doing the training, those kind of things, on what we can do to help. But I think more organic movements sometimes are a little bit more effective. And I think of opportunities I've had to do some training with support raising, and those groups have started their own Facebook groups, private groups, secret groups even, where they can be completely open and honest with each other and maybe share some struggles, but certainly share the victories too. And that's a great encouragement, as you're reading what God's doing in other people's lives, and hopefully it gives you a little bit more encouragement. At the same time, you can have people praying for you. You're getting ready to go out and share your vision with somebody. And it's great to know that those people who are in it with you, and they're really in the same timeline that you are, and just to know that they're behind you and you're not in this alone. That's a great encouragement, I think.
Right. So really take advantage of the different communication tools. Social media could be one, but it could just be phone calls. It could be emails. It could just getting together
Yeah. Texting is a great thing. I have a friend who takes prayer requests, and when she prays for them, she just sends a text that says, "Amen."
Oh, yeah.
And she says, whenever you get that text, just know that I've been praying for you. That's a great encouragement.
Very cool. Very cool. What other tricks and tips would you give to someone that, again, probably the most people listening to this, they're within their first month of raising support, and they might have had some success. They might have also got shot down. Probably some of them have been shot down by a family member, so it hurt a little extra. So a little more, continue just to kind of pour some knowledge and some wisdom into the listeners that are at that point where they really need to not only just be encouraged, but they need to seek encouragement.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that God hasn't called you to the results, that you just need to be faithful with what God has called you to do at the moment. Obviously, you need to bathe this whole thing in prayer, and not just your normal prayer time, but set aside some time to specifically pray about your support team, both those who are already on your team and those that God has for you. And sometimes we call this support discovery, because God knows who those people are already, and you're just in the process of discovering who those are, and God has a purpose and a plan for the process as well. But I think it's always good to remember that God's just called us to do what we're supposed to do. And I remember one couple, the very first training that I did with the SRS organization for our own organization, we had a couple who'd been struggling for a little while to gain their support. And so they came to this training and they were excited, so much so that the man in this relationship, he quit his part-time job so he could focus full-time. His wife was able a few weeks later to leave her part-time job as well. Oh. So they were really getting focused. They were out traveling. They were making it happen. And they made significant progress. They took it all the way up to 90% in just a few months. And I was really excited about what God was doing. Now, they didn't come from big church backgrounds. They didn't have a lot of ministry experience, and they were a young couple. So it's not one of these, that gets their support just by sneezing. Right. And they're not platform people either. You wouldn't say, oh, yeah, obviously they got their support quickly because such a great communicator. I mean, They're wonderful, faithful people, but you wouldn't say like these people are just going to make it happen automatically. But they were going along.
Super dynamic, but they were working hard.
Oh, they were going after it. And it was interesting because they were about 90%. They plateaued just a little bit. And I got a phone call. And this potential supporter said, what would it take to get them to the field? And so I told him what the remaining 10% would be. And he said, well, let them know it's time to go. We're going to take care of that for them.
Yeah.
And so I called the missionary and said, what you up to today? Well, I'm doing this for my grandmother today, but we're trying to figure out where we're going to get some new contacts and how we're going to finish off our support. We got some people who are still praying about it. And I said, well, that's great. Continue to follow up with those, but just want to let you know that you are at 100%. God has provided.
But that was a fun phone call today.
Oh, I love those calls. But it was all because this potential supporter had been watching.
Yeah.
And they'd been seeing their faithfulness and their focus and their desire and their urgency to get to the field.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what God was doing behind the scenes.
Seriously, right?
They were just being faithful. And God took care of them.
Amen. You had said something earlier I want to circle back around to, because I thought it was one of those simply profound things is that the results aren't really your thing. They're God's thing. And so I know that what you're implying there is, hey, you need to be faithful in inviting people to partner with you in the ministry you're supposed to do, both prayer and financial, not either or, both. Right. But I know so often people, that's hard. That's easy to think. It's hard to do it, and it's hard to apply. And so describe a time, and this could be from your own life if you'd like, or perhaps from someone you've coached, where you could just tell that they were fine. They might have gotten a hard no, a surprising no, if you will, but they were spiritually healthy in such a way that they were like, okay, you know what? I did my part. I invited somebody to be a part of my team. They said no. It's okay. God has other people. We hear about those stories now, and you and I have been able to experience that to a degree, but tell us a story, like a practical, put a little flesh on the bones of that, if you would, where somebody that happened to, or maybe it was even you.
Well, I can think of a recent example of a young man who came through our candidate school, and he was doing an incredible job of sharing the ministry. Probably, between 12 and 18 times a week,
Mm.
he was sharing his ministry.
Wow.
And obviously not all those were coming aboard,
Sure.
but just by the sheer number of people he was contacting, a lot was, he was making some really great progress. And the interesting thing was that it was a busy time in the ministry. He was already plugged into the ministry at that point in some ways. And, but he didn't really use that as an excuse. He kept after it. And it was funny because there was one week when he sent in a report and he said, well, really busy this week, so I didn't have time to make any presentations. And I look at his report and he picked up still like 3 supporters for about $400 a month.
Oh.
Because of all the people that he'd been sharing with week after week. And some of them just took a little bit longer to make
Sure.
that commitment. So it was exciting to see that his past faithfulness continued to bear fruit.
Right.
In fact, I have another candidate who went ahead and went to language school here in the United States in preparation to go to South America. And they'd been very faithful. In fact, they bought a motorhome to travel around and do their support raising because they had a large family.
Wow.
And so he actually hasn't had the opportunity to go out and do much presentations because he's learning Spanish. But still, week by week, I get reports that 1 new supporter here, 2 new supporters here. The support continues to come in because he was so faithful along the way. And it's been an encouragement to him, I think, to see God's continuing to work because of his faithfulness in the past. And so it's exciting to see him move forward that way.
Cool. All right, Ryan. So I know that sometimes people can have a bit of an expectation as to who might or who might not support them. And that can cause a little bit of issues. That can make it a little bit of a little rough patch for people sometimes. I think it's even harder when you really think somebody's going to join your team and they don't. And then it's really refreshing when somebody joins your team that you aren't counting on. But to talk about, just the encouragement, discouragement part of that, because I know that happens to, well, just about everybody I've ever known who's raised supporter.
Yeah, it's fun because you do these trainings and people come with great expectations and they almost have in their mind, this person, they could almost fully fund my ministry on their own. And I might make 1 or 2 appointments and all of a sudden I'm going to be there. And I think I probably had those same thoughts myself. In fact, it was interesting. You think, well, my family, definitely they're going to get on board with me and some close friends. And, in fact, some of them, they could fully fund my ministry if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And the reality is those typically weren't the people that came through.
Rarely are.
And who were the people? I didn't know where they were coming up with the money. Single moms who were raising kids of their own. But, they knew because we were involved in youth ministry, the importance of that in the life of a young person. Mm. And so you can have all kinds of expectations, but, God's got a plan. And he knows who those people are. And it would be great if everyone wants to join, but God has your team out there.
Right.
And you just have to trust that he's the one who knows who those people are.
Yeah. Yeah. And God rarely follows our plan. So it turns out he never follows our plan. He follows his plan. Sometimes we know what his plan is, but not often enough, apparently. So anyway, very cool. Well, listen, I know that sometimes people, and you touched on this. People they get to find people that are part of their team along the way that they didn't expect to be a part of their team. And as a guy that's lived fully funded for 21 years now, what does that look like? So let's give a little hope to people that are like, wait a minute, you're telling me the people on my team I haven't even met yet? Yeah, we actually think so. But what does that look like 2 decades later when somebody that might have started as an almost stranger has been walking with you and praying for you and financially supporting you for a long time? To just kind of give us a little bit of a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, well, it's hard to believe. And some of those supporters, maybe they were only able to take you on for $5 or $10 a month when they first started. But, as your ministries continued and they continued to increase their involvement, and not that it's about the amount at all, but just that they would stick with you over those long periods of time. And sometimes you're faithful in your communication and sometimes you're busy and you're less faithful, mm-hmm. but they stick with you because they believe in what God's doing in your ministry. And they want to be a part of what God's doing. Yeah. And, I think when you realize that it's not about the need, mm-hmm. Like Paul says, it's not that I seek the gift, I seek the fruit that abounds to your account.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference because people aren't really supporting me. They want to be a part of what God's doing.
Yeah.
Not even what I'm doing, but what God's doing and the fruit that's credited to their account as a result of that. And I mentioned before, sometimes you don't really know who those people are going to be. Recently, my younger daughter had a missions trip that she was going to do to the country of Brazil. And as a part of this, she needed to send out, it was actually a part of her class in college. All the students were going on a missions trip, and it was called Missions Reality. And so an opportunity she needed to have some contacts to send some letters to.
So she had a little support raising lab as a part of her coursework.
Yeah, exactly. And so they wanted her to send out some letters. And, so she only needed to send out 50 to begin with. And so I was going through a list of supporters, pretty much taking them in zip code order as they were on my sheet.
Sure.
And there was this couple that, took me to church when I was a kid. But the last time I visited their church, which is one of our supporting churches, they weren't there. They had some health issues, and they're getting older. And so I thought, well, I'm probably not going to put them on the list because, they have all kinds of needs themselves and those kind of things. And it was kind of one of those things where God kind of convicted me. Yeah, they would be interested to know what's happening in the next generation of your family and that your daughter is interested in pursuing this missions opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm just going to leave them on the list. And the interesting thing was, this is not a couple that had been supporting us regularly, monthly, but occasionally they send in a gift. And before we even put those letters in the mail, I look at my report, and they sent in a nice gift.
Oh, really?
A very substantial gift to our ministry. And it was just one of those confirmations that, God has a plan, God has a purpose.
Yeah.
And you can be encouraged that you don't know where it's going to come from.
That's right. That's right.
God's at work in people's hearts, and they want to be a part of what you're doing.
So do your part, be faithful to what God's called you to do. We want you to be encouraged, but we also want you to be faithful. We're not promising it to be hard. We're not promising it's going to be easy. In fact, it might be rather hard, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be faithful to what God's put in front of us. And that doesn't mean we can't be encouraged that He's at work in ways we might not even fully be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ryan, it's a pleasure to be friends with you. It's a pleasure to have you be a part of what we were doing with these recordings. Thank you for the work that you do with Word of Life and for your consistent ongoing service. And God bless you, my friend.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us. We encourage you to listen and subscribe to the SRS podcast that answers questions and dives into topics relevant to ministry partner development. For more resources, browse our website, supportraisingsolutions.org.